right? That the literacies of school should not take you adrift from the literacies at home and the community. And literacies at school should not require you to abandon literacies at home and the community. What we want are people that are multiply literate. Right? And I can attest to being a kid at school, and the literacies I was learning in school were putting me in direct confrontation with literacies at home and the community. As a matter of fact, they were saying people in your home and community don't know how to talk, don't know how to think, don't have a history. Right? And so I think we've moved a long way in the 30 years since I was in school to say, no, this is a both end. It's important for you to learn the languages and discourses of power, but it's also important for you to remain attached to the language and literacies of home, family, culture, community. And then finally, as technologies change, literacies change, right? So, we're writing in our notebooks, but, this film that's being taken here can be put up on YouTube. People Twitter, they text message, right? We live in a world that's multimodal, and the professional world, the civic worlds are multimodal, so the academic world has to be multimodal. We have to help kids acquire these literacies. So these are the kinds of literacies that we try to address in our curriculum. There's a need for powerful teaching. I'll talk about the what, the kinds of things that we've done, but I want to start by the how. Right? We need to prepare young people to be strong and active citizens, not just people who can reiterate knowledge, but people who can produce knowledge, not people that can tell you what the right answer is, but people who can tell you what the right question is. Right? Those are the important skills for young people in the 21st century. We need more student voice. Young people need to learn how to find and express their own voice as part of the academic enterprise, so that they can be powerful on their own behalf when they leave the classroom, so that they can advocate for their own children, their own communities, and not have to have people advocate for them. We need to have more connection to communities and to culture. We need to promote learning through service to others. That education is not just about what you do for yourself. Education is about what you can give to others. And that's something that has to be ingrained in elementary school. Right? As soon as we learn, we give back now. Can we start a recycling program? Can we start an anti-violence program? Can we start an anti-graffiti program? What can we do right now, 7, 8, 9 years old? If you want people to be voting citizens, you want people to be active participants at 35, we have to start that training at 5. Right? That's an important part of this powerful teaching. And to remedy societal inequalities through education. Right? Education should contribute to making the world a better place. And so the practice of education has to be about that. Okay. Another part of the how, is really moving from what I've called and others have called the banking form of education, where we basically see the kids as these empty receptacles, right? You open up their head at age 5, and you start dumping stuff in, and at 18 years old, you close it and send them off into the world. And that's the banking form of education. It assumes that they don't know a lot, they're not learning a lot outside what you're teaching them, and that you already have all the answers. Or as educators, we already have all the answers. Right? And that banking form of education is really one that creates compliance workers more than it creates active citizens. What we want is a more transformative model. How can we learn through posing problems? How can we ask students questions we don't know the answers to? Like, how do we end violence in our school? We don't have the answer, but maybe we can work together to figure it out. Is much more of a process that they need to. Like, how do we end violence in our school? We don't have the answer, but maybe we can work together to figure it out. Is much more of a process that they need in order to kind of acquire these skills of active citizenship. Right. So these are some of the tenets from 18 years of doing this kind of work, of powerful teaching. One, we think of the act of reading. But it's not just reading the word, it's reading the world. I know that my students are getting it when they take the ideas from the class and translate them into the world. Where they're watching the news coverage and they say, wait a second, that's not right. This group is not being treated fairly. Or they look at problems in the world and think, what can we do about this? So they're reading the world. The second is active involvement. You'll see a lot of slides where I have students, and very few of them are they just sitting there in the classroom and with their heads down at a desk. How do we get kids actively involved? Actively involved around campus, actively involved in their community, actively involved in their neighborhoods, actively involved in global issues. Citizenship education is related. How do we get students to feel like they're a part of the larger human family? And how do we create those attachments of tolerance and understanding and openness as part of our education process? So it's not just about acquiring discrete skills, but a tolerance and a sensibility and openness to others. And finally, this youth empowerment. Education is powerful when the recipients of education become more powerful. More powerful in the present, not the future. So I look at how have young people been made more powerful by this pedagogical intervention? What can they do now that they couldn't do before? What are they doing now that they didn't do before? That's the measure of youth empowerment, not by a test, but by their actions. I was reading a quote by Gandhi. He says that actions reflect priorities. Right? So if our priority is youth empowerment, then we'll see more powerful young people in our schools, in our classrooms, in our community. Okay. So the core principles I've already talked about: engagement, what they're confident in, what's relevant to them; affirmation, that you can learn and be affirmed for who you are, who your parents taught you to be, how you speak at home, and what your cultural heritage is. That's not going to interfere with your education. It's going to bolster your education. Discipline. This requires hard work. Right? If you want to be an intellectual, if you want to help your family, if you want to help your community, that's going to require hard work on your part. Right? True love is tough love in education. Write it again, rewrite it, correct those spelling errors. I'm not sending you out into the world thinking that you can misspell and get away with it. Not because I hate you, but because I love you. Right? Discipline. In order to confront the problems that the 21st century has brought to us, we need people who can work hard. And the difference between anger and discipline is love. I'm not angry at you. This is because I care about you. But that has to be a part of it. We have to have young people working harder. We have to have them doing more. High expectations leads to high outcomes, right? We set a glass ceiling on student ability by our expectations. And I say that a lot, and with my pre-service teachers, that don't think that because, this kid is poor, so I'm not going to expect a lot out of her. But that's a disservice to her, that's a disservice to her family, it's a disservice to the people who are working very hard so that she can be in your classroom right now. Because what they want for that kid, what my grandma wanted for me, was to get an education so that I didn't have to do what she had to do to survive. And that required discipline. The last three: purpose, inspiration, and love. Give students a purpose. People want to belong to something. A purpose right now. We are the freedom riders.